Hey guys, welcome back to Bible Fun with the Nuns. Today we're studying Deuteronomy chapter 3. Let's get started.
Okay, Deuteronomy chapter number 3 is a really interesting chapter because it's another battle that the Israelites were going to fight. And this chapter is full of battles and cities and even a giant. Jim, what was your main takeaway of this passage?
So even after all that, they finally trusted in God that He would fight for them, and they won the battle, like David and Goliath.
Okay, so Jeb and I were talking about this just a little bit before we started, that this story is like other stories in the Bible where if you looked on paper, one side shouldn't have been strong enough to defeat the other side. But the little guys, the Israelites, defeated the big guys, which was Og, king of Bashan. They defeated them. Well, was it because Israel was strong?
No. Because God fought for them.
That's exactly right. Thank you very much. All right, so let's take a look at this chapter real quick. This chapter is another example that God is going to deal with their hearts before He deals with their land. Now think about it like this. We can see that because when we read through this story, the emphasis here is do not fear. And the reason they don't have to fear is because the Lord is once again making a promise. Now listen to this. Verse 2 says, "And the Lord said to me, do not fear him, for I have delivered him and all his people into your hand." So they didn't have to fear, not because there was nothing to fear. Often in life, there's a lot of things we fear. But they didn't have to because God had made a promise to them, and God is always going to keep His promise. I want you to notice too, because this is going forward into the book of Joshua. Look in verse 3. "So the Lord our God also delivered into our hands Og, king of Bashan." So this is an important point to make. As the Israelites are going into all of these battles and they're eventually going into the promised land, they aren't winning these battles. They are inheriting the land that God is giving them. They are not doing this by their own strength, by their own might, by their own wisdom, by their own power. They are receiving from God what He has graciously given them. John, what was your takeaway from this?
So my takeaway was much similar to Jeb's, and it was, so there's this verse, and it was verse 22 and it said, the Lord told them, "Do not be afraid, for I will fight your battles for you." And
Good memorization, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, so that means, like, while I was explaining my takeaway before the video, I compared it to David and Goliath. And David was not supposed to win because Goliath is this big 3-meter tall guy with big muscles. And David is a small, puny guy that has a slingshot. But God fought David's battles, and David won.
All right. You also compared this before we talked to kind of like Philippians 4:13 in the New Testament. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And that doesn't mean that like I can make any basketball shot I want from like across the world because I'm a Christian. What does this mean? What does it mean that they can have victory because God is with them? What does that mean?
It means like, okay, so sin is like bad, yeah.
I agree.
And wait. Okay, so sin is bad, and God fought their battles for them, and so that doesn't mean like my dad said. That doesn't mean you can make an awesome basketball shot, but it means God will help you with, stuff.
That's right. So where does the power come? Does the power come from within us, or does the power come from the Lord?
The Lord.
That's right. Now let's let me key you into this a little bit. So when the Israelites win this battle, notice what it says in verse 5. "And all of these cities were fortified with high walls and gates and bars beside many rural towns." And then down at the end, it describes this king, Og. He says, "For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of the giants. Indeed, his bedstand was an iron bedstand. It was 9 cubits in length and 4 cubits in width, according to the standard cubit. He's a giant. And so not only are they defeating giants, but they're also defeating cities that have huge walls all around them. All right, now let's think about this. You remember when Moses sent in the spies to the promised land, they brought back the big cluster of grapes? Were they ready to go into the promised land, or were they afraid?
They were afraid.
They were afraid. And so for 40 years, they weren't allowed to go into the promised land. They had to walk around the what?
The walls.
They walked around the walls of Jericho, but they had to wander around the wilderness for 40 years. And it was because they were afraid of the walls, they were afraid of giants, and they were afraid of losing these battles. Well, listen, now that generation is gone, the next generation is here, and their second battle they've already defeated giant walled cities and giant people. The very things they were afraid of 40 years ago are the first things God delivers to them here in this moment. Now, Israel was getting the battle experience they needed to remember that God could help them overcome all the future enemies that they were going to encounter. There's also something else that happens here. Moses has some consequences. So because in a previous story, God told Moses to go talk to a rock and it was going to pour out water so that people could drink, he didn't talk to it. He hit the rock. And he's yelling at the people. He said, why do Aaron and I have to keep doing these things for you guys? Well, listen, did Moses make the water or did God make the water?
God.
But Moses got angry, lashed out, and he kind of said that, why do I have to keep taking care of you people like this? Well, listen, he never took care of them.
God did.
That's right, God did. Well, God said, Moses, he said, because of that moment, here's your consequence. You're going to take the people all the way up to the promised land, but you're not going to get to go into it. And we say, wow, that's a pretty tough consequence, right? But listen, when God chooses us to be leaders, does he set high standards for us or low standards?
High.
High standards. And high standards sometimes have high consequences. And so Moses says, God, no, please change your mind. Please, 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 please. And God says, nope, we're not going to talk about this anymore. And they just go on. So not only is God keeping his promise to give his people what they couldn't give themselves, he gives them victory, but he also shows that sometimes there are consequences to our actions. And we need to be very careful about what we do so that it always honors God. So today, we need to live our lives in a way where we're thinking about, does what I say, what I think, and what I do, does it honor God or dishonor God? And we want to live in a way that pleases him and doesn't displease him. So let's keep reading. Tomorrow we get into chapter 4. Then the next day, the 10 Commandments. This is a good book. I'm excited about it. All right? Everybody have a good day. Bye.
Bye.